to Tuesdays with Morrissey. I'm your host, Adam Morrissey. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by a friend and entrepreneurial legend, Cooper Newby. Cooper is the founder of Classet and formerly the founder and co-founder of Blue Crew, both kind of focused on workplace technology. One thing I think is really interesting about Cooper is he was one of my first friends in the technology world before I joined a startup. And I was telling him a little bit about the opportunity, and he said, sounds interesting. I think you should do it. And Cooper, first off, welcome to the show. What I thought was so interesting about that comment is, it really spoke to an entrepreneurial worldview you seem to hold. Could you speak as you introduce yourself a little bit about, the worldview and the way you look at the workplace and opportunities?
Yeah, thanks, Adam, for the introduction. I generally just think that people have this preconceived notion that startups are super risky, and that makes people kind of hesitate to jump in. But what I found, that's what I when founding Blue Crew and having the decision of going into the working world or taking a leap on this. So I completely understand. But I found that, worst case, you fail your startup and you can get a new job in leadership because you've dealt with managing people, you've dealt solving any problem that comes across your desk, and it makes you a real asset to other companies. So a lot of my friends who have shut down their startups end up in leadership roles at Facebook, Google, starting another startup, so it kind of launches you, and it's less risky than people actually think.
Yeah, I definitely experienced that myself. I mean, there's certainly no lack of ambiguity in startup world, but there's also no lack of ambiguity in leadership worlds. And it's a little bit, even if you have a failed startup, it's kind of like those head football coaches that keep failing upwards and getting the good deals. Let's talk a little bit about Classet. I understand you guys are, looking to empower the next generation of skilled tradesmen. Could you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing there?
Yeah. So at Classet, we're really aiming to close the growing skills gap in the skilled trades by exposing more people to the skilled trades and helping existing skilled trades companies hire new workers, and kind of we're their toolbox for getting more people in. So we're helping recruit, and we're also recruiting the next generation of high schoolers because there's a huge growing shortage of construction skilled trades labor.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting about the skilled trades is like, you think there's so many economic factors and macro factors impacting that shortage. What are some things when you guys were looking at the problem for this that you guys were thinking about that this could help solve?
Yeah, I think everyone experienced some form of this during COVID where, you could not get a skilled tradesperson in, and it was extremely expensive. And that's really the core problem, is they don't have enough people in it. And it takes 4 years to become a journeyman. And you have to become a handy person, which doesn't happen naturally to most people. So really it has to start in middle school with, using a drill and doing these simple things. And then just looking at the numbers, every week a new article comes out. The average age of a skilled tradesman is 55. So there's going to be a 3 million person shortage by 2028 in the skilled trades. And you can't snap your fingers and get 3 million new plumbers, HVAC installers, solar installers. Can't happen. So
yeah,
trying to get ahead of that problem.
It's really interesting. In my role at ShipShape, I work a lot with contractors too. One of the things we talk a lot about with, rising technology is how some of these skilled trade jobs are actually prepared to be the jobs of the future. Because not only, the being a skilled tradesman is much more than the nuts and bolts. I mean, you're also serving as like a real human counselor and advocate for this homeowner, ushering them through a project they otherwise wouldn't understand.
Yeah. And they can be more expensive than, the second most expensive thing to your car, right?
Some of these maintenance, individual maintenance projects can be the most expensive purchase that somebody makes in their entire year. For some people, for some people, it's like the fourth or fifth largest purchase of their life. Yeah, it might be one of these HVAC systems.
Yeah, we talked a lot at, some people would talk to us at Blue Crew and say, what are you going to do? Blue Crew is an on-demand staffing agency, so we helped people hire high volume amount of people into warehouse and logistics jobs. So think like Uber for warehouse work. But there, people were like, what are you going to do when, Amazon automates their whole entire warehouse or AI takes over all these jobs? And it's funny because recently it's switched. Now people are like, these white collar jobs are going to be automated. There's no way you're going to automate ever a plumber's job or an electrician, because they're dealing with they're going into basement that's under the house. It's something you just can't build a robot to do anytime soon. So
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, they're definitely jobs that are going to be enhanced by technology. I've heard some things about like plumbing, almost readers that scan the house and identify plumbing risks. So it's pretty cool how they'll be empowered, and then also how homeowners, there generally seems to be an increased appreciation that the cost of owning a home isn't just taxes, mortgage, and insurance, but also includes energy and maintenance.
yeah, I mean, it's if you're thinking of starting a business, one of the easiest ways to do that right now is start a skilled trades business. You can, if you have the skills, you can buy a van and you can go out and make a bunch of money. So that's the other thing that's really appealing to people is the opportunity and the entrepreneurship opportunities for anyone going into the trades, which is, that's pretty unique to skilled trades labor.
Yeah,
sure.
and I've worked with a number of contractors, and it's amazing how programmatic it can be. If you have the playbook, how many leads you're going to generate per marketing dollar, how many of those leads you're going to close, and it can be a really good sustainable path to entrepreneurship. When you were talking about this shortfall of jobs. What was that in 2050?
2028,
2028. What
3
was the
million
shortfall?
opening,
3.2.
3 million, 3 million
So
jobs open.
so let's you're you guys are a startup still growing. You guys are solving a problem that probably grows more like an oak tree than a squash. It's going to take a long time. So, how are you guys thinking about tackling this? And then how do you balance that with some of the demands and pressure of being an early stage company?
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
One of my
And we think about that a
favorite
lot.
mentors. Yeah. It takes a lifetime to grow an oak tree, but only 6 months to grow a squash.
Yeah. So, I mean, our approach there is uh, we need to solve the problem right now of a plumbing company or a handyman company just bleeding, and their number one problem is we need to hire skilled people now. So these are not the apprentices. These are not the people who are in high school right now. These are people who've been in the trades for a year or two, or working their way through it, or maybe been in it for 20 years. So we're helping them recruit to solve their short-term problem, but our long-term goal is to increase the on-ramps into the trades. So helping people get their hands on things. We've created a bunch of cool tools like the periodic table of skilled trades, so that a high schooler who has no idea what the difference between a plumber and an electrician is can go and watch TikTok style videos of people doing a bunch of different trades to get a sense. They can take a quiz and understand what the best fit might be for their personality just by watching videos. And then we want to open up more pathways into apprenticeships and make it easier for companies to add those people that are a little bit riskier, who are earlier in their career. So that's our long-term plan, but you're 100% right. It doesn't happen overnight. You need to kind of become exposed to it, 5 or 6 times before you actually think it's a real kind of career pathway. And we think that'll just grow stronger as more and more people start to realize that college might be, going into a bunch of college debt isn't right for everyone. And the stat is like 62% of, people don't have a bachelor's degree, and all those people could go into the trades with a little bit of training.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked earlier about the entrepreneurial opportunities in the skilled trades, but there's also, a ton. It seems like, you'd need some experience to get there. So let's talk a little bit about, what are some of like, and I don't know who all these people are by name, but like, what are some of the established powers in the trades world doing to help contribute to solving this shortfall?
Yeah. So, the typical route, if you want to become a journeyman in any of these construction trades, you can either go to a union, and the unions do a really good job of training, but they kind of are reactionary to a lot of like macro, you know, demand issues. So they're never going to be able to scale up their programs to handle the amount of demand for, replacing just the people retiring. So, and they're kind of antiquated in the way that they take, you have to drop off a paper application, and they only offer, trainings a couple times a year. So getting in is very competitive, but they do a really good job, and you have a lot of, benefits. And then there's just a ton of money going into increasing apprenticeships and a bunch of nonprofits and, women in trades, bunch of organizations. But there's a mismatch of, all the training and great exposure to things. Another one's called HBI, Home Builders Institute. So they get you trained up, but then there's a mismatch getting people actually into roles. So, the exposure to what each of these companies and the company culture at all of these mom and pop or larger trades contractors are. So we're hoping to merge those so that we're not going to train people up to be an electrician better than a master electrician. But what we can do is help people find the right fit and make it easier for those companies to take on these early trained people, because there is a ton of grant money that's gone to all these organizations. Explore the Trades is another one. So there's just all these people trying to solve the same problem. And the really cool thing is everyone's working together. There's a ton of camaraderie even between competitors, because everyone just realizes it's going to be such a big problem that we're going to need all the help we can get.
That's a really cool space to be in. Those markets where there's enough opportunity for more than one group to be successful. You were mentioned, Blue Crew earlier. That was a company you founded and had an exit from. So congratulations, and a YC company too. So really cool stuff. How do you connect the dots between Crew days to launching Classet?
Yeah. So, I mean, both of our companies are dealing with high volume hiring. So at Blue Crew, we would over and over see these amazing workers come in and blow the socks off all of these employers with, their reliability, their ability to learn, their respectfulness. But then you'd have like the people who weren't so great, showing up to work late, missing days and things. And the difference between that amazing worker and the terrible,
Less reliable
worker who maybe, less reliable, would be like $1 an hour difference. So, we had a few examples at Blue Crew where a couple employees came into the Lyft bikes and scooters warehouse, and they were working, low hourly wages in the warehouse, picking and packing all the scooter parts, charging the scooters. And they, through osmosis, learned how to become scooter mechanics. And all of a sudden they went from being, close to minimum wage worker. They were earning significantly more per hour, so they could make a meaningful change in their lives. So that was, so eye-opening to watch how much of a struggle it is for an hourly worker to, if they can't get to work, a lot of times it's truly because they can't pay their cell bill or they can't pay a gas bill. So it's these real issues. And the best way to solve that is upskilling, so you can break out of that glass ceiling of, warehouse work where you're quitting your job to make 25 cents an hour more across the street. And instead you're the most in-demand mechanic on the block. So we got really inspired to build Classet after, watching that story play over and over at Blue Crew, and wanted to focus purely on upskilling into the trade.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, a lot of that reliability in their performance can be a lot of things outside of work that are
100%.
preventing them from showing up and performing. You mentioned cell bills. I know there's a lot of things around urban planning, around just general transportation, and depending on the area of the country you are, it can be worse than others. A lot of people, when we meet with investors or people that we're working with, one of the questions they ask is just like, "Hey, why are you doing this?" Like, starting a company is so hard. So, what were some of the things that you were thinking about when considering, starting your second startup?
Yeah, I'm a mechanical engineer by training, and luckily, my dad, I was building things from the time I could walk in his amazing garage. So I feel lucky that I got that exposure, and when I got to college, there were a bunch of my mechanical engineering colleagues who didn't know how to hold a drill, and you're making physical things, so had to learn that from scratch. So I have a big passion for trying to get people that exposure earlier and learn like the physical skills for hardware and the trades. But also just Blue Crew was the most impactful thing I've ever experienced because it was such an eye-opening thing to really understand how hard it is to be a low-income hourly worker. Just the struggles that that I've faced to that point were minuscule compared to having 3 kids and trying to figure out daycare when if you miss another day you'll get fired. So, and just watching how hard it is to actually make it live in the Bay Area on a $14 an hour salary back when we were starting.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's really driven by it. You seem to have found some incredible levels of alignment. You had your early childhood experiences that fueled your interest, and you've been able to combine that and continue to build, and the story just continues to unfold in more and more alignment. How would you say, when you were talking about low income workers, I wasn't sure if you were talking about some of the Blue Crew team or you as a founder. How has the second time? How has the second time been different? Second time founder.
Yeah, that's a complex question because so many variables are different the second time around. My mentor at Y Combinator, Dalton Caldwell, he said it perfectly. He was like, really, the second time around, a lot of the things that were really hard the first time are super easy. Like hiring tends to be easier, fundraising tends to be easier because you have all these relationships. Your action plan seems to be easier, but the really challenging thing, he said, is most second time founders bite off more than they can chew. They want to solve the world's biggest problems, like solve climate change or global warming. And that's really hard to actually jump in and make a difference. You kind of have to be targeted at first to really launch something that can make money and drive itself to growth. So, choosing the second idea is always hard. Finding a problem that's small enough where you can actually make an impact has been took a year of exploration before figuring it
Yeah.
out.
How do you feel like some of the things I've experienced is a growth and patience and perspective and comfort and ambiguity. How have you felt like when you look back at Blue Crew? What are some things and tools, in this case not physical but mental or metaphorical, that you've been able to use at Classet?
Yeah. I mean, there's the amount of learnings you get from starting your first startup are so incredible that's what makes, if you do start a startup, you'll learn so much that makes you so invaluable to other companies because you kind of have to deal with everything from, unclogging a toilet to like, the whole the whole database falling over. You got to do it all. So, and managing people, that's you trial by fire there as well. So I learned a bunch of things, but mainly like the main takeaways that I had were really like you gotta build an amazing team and pay them what they're worth. The first startup, it was hard because we were so resource constrained, but getting those first early hires at Blue Crew were so key and couldn't have gone anywhere without them. And that just continues to compound. So hiring quickly and firing quickly if somebody isn't working out. And then kind of the other interesting thing is I've always feel if you can't launch a product or a feature or whatever it is in a month, if it'll take longer than a month, it's probably not worth trying and doing because things tend to slip. You should be able to test something and build an MVP really quickly in 2 or 3 weeks, see what happens, see if people like it. And then if it takes longer than that, you're just taking a huge risk because time is the most valuable resource. So you may end up scrapping it. People may not use it as much as you thought. So as you're talking to customers, just even if it's a Google spreadsheet, you can prototype something, see if they use it, and then build it out iteratively instead of like a huge drawn out process.
Yeah, that's super
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, like this term I heard or the phrase I heard was, if you're not a little insecure about the product you're going to market with, you're probably waiting too long, which is
Yeah.
hard to get your arms around, especially, I think for anybody, it takes an adjustment. And then the other concept I've heard is, balancing um, business development with product development, traction and development. That's what it seems like you were alluding to. Could you speak a little bit more about how you've been able to successfully balance those?
Yeah. Just with like balancing product and
Yeah, I mean, because you're going to market with
business.
an immature product inherently, so you need to
Mhm.
develop enough to get feedback, and you need that feedback to develop the product. So it does seem there's a little
Yeah.
bit of a balancing act. And what's so fascinating to me about startups is, that's not maybe if you're really early stage, that's one person. But no, as you get bigger, like it's entire organizations, and that sort of like cross functional dance just blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of gets out of hand quickly as the team grows. And that's why I love like the early stages because you can move so quick. And so I think to answer your question, you really have to find amazing early adopters. So we've been lucky to find clients like Ace Handyman Services where they are so bought into not only the mission of getting more people into the trades, but bought in trying things before, knowing full well that they're not polished. So if you can find those early adopters who are willing to put up with things when they break, but give you amazing feedback and ideas and almost are product team members, those are amazing because they'll put, those early adopters will put up with a lot. And the tools now to do kind of no code um, product front ends and while you use a spreadsheet as a back end are pretty cool. So you really don't need, it's just it's just the co-founders right now at Classet, and we've been able to build a pretty established product. So things are getting to the point where you don't even have to be a huge technical whiz to build out an MVP. You can just kind of put a spreadsheet, a Google sheet in the background or an Airtable and hook it up to a fancy front end and really make a lot of quick product iterations before investing the time to build out a huge infrastructure. And so I'm pretty excited about the ability to keep teams nimble and small and engineers that are actually talking to customers in the future.
Yeah. So it sounds like on Classet, is it more product led growth? Is that like kind of the thought, or how do you guys balance like the direct selling to expand versus product?
Yeah, I mean we do direct selling, but the we're taking the product where our customers want it, and a lot of them say like Indeed just doesn't work for hiring skilled tradespeople. It's expensive. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for them to connect with automated screening and stuff and just following their lead. So definitely our clients are leading the development, and I would encourage anyone who's thinking about starting a startup to find those early adopters and just talk to them as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. How do you guys balance like it's not like necessarily a secret, but sometimes big companies might look like early adopters, but they might not be as friendly as they seem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, big companies inherently have a lot of typically it's the small businesses that are easier to work with,
Yeah.
middle-sized businesses. Big ones have like extra privacy concerns, typically a larger bureaucratic organization. So it's harder to move quick on both sides if
Mhm.
you're focused on those things. So the small nimble ones are probably
Yeah, a
the
lot
early
of
place to start.
platform businesses have that serve companies definitely have seemed to start in small to medium sized businesses, and maybe there's a greater tolerance for a lighter version that meets their use cases, and then they can build those features as they ramp up. Cooper, you've been in the startup world for over 10 years now. You're on your second startup. You've gotten education and mentorship from places like YC. Any book recommendations or content you'd recommend for listeners?
I mean, not really related to startups, but I like The Fourth Turning. It's a book about kind of how humans move in these um, 80-year blocks of time where they repeat things, and different generations kind of react similarly in these four categories every 80 years, and it turns over, which I just think is really cool for kind of generating a worldview of how Gen Z will react to things versus millennials. But
Wait, what
I
are
love
what are the big four? What are the four aspects?
there's like millennials are the hero, and then Gen Zs are the artists, because basically when you're the heroes go through some traumatic event. And so this was written in like 1996, and it described the pandemic pretty much, like going through the '08 crash and the pandemic, and coming out of the workforce really excited to solve those problems. And then Gen Z is the artistic one. I forget the names of the other two, but they're uh, the starting generation was two generations before the millennials, and then now Gen Z like react to the crisis by getting really into art, and so they're the artistic generation. But it's really cool way to look at things, because they go back all the way through time to like the Romans and Greeks, and they all had versions of this. The theory is that humans live in 80-year
Yep.
life cycles, and we kind of repeat the same mistakes. So it's a really cool book.
No, we'll look into that for sure. I
Highly
mean, it's
recommend.
interesting. Yeah, it's like not only do we live 80-year life cycles, we also see four generations. It'd be
Yeah,
interesting
exactly.
that you see like one or two before, and then two or three behind you, and that's really interesting. I'll have to look more into that. What else? What else stands
Yeah.
out to you?
I love all Ben
Me
Horowitz's
too.
books. And then 0 to 1 is great as well, Peter Thiel. But the best way is just to start your own company. You can read as much as
Yeah.
you want. The Y Combinator for website has a ton of amazing how to start a startup guides, and unfortunately, you kind of have to make all the mistakes yourself to learn them. Everybody
Hmm.
does, but you make yourself stronger at the end
Yeah.
of
I
it. So
remember a couple years ago, like I ski a little bit, but not a ton, and uh, was out in Colorado, and my one of my friends' dads like has this speech he gives everyone that doesn't ski a lot. He says, you'll be going up the gondola with him, and he'll say, see that person on the ground, or you see that person skiing over there? they started just where you were. So a little bit around, making your own mistakes, making the fall. Cooper, you've been really gracious with your time. What's the best way to keep up with Cooper Newby and Classet?
Probably just the Classet website, www.classet.org. You can check out some skilled trades. And LinkedIn.
Cool. We'll make sure to have links to both of those in the show notes. But thanks again for coming on the show, Coop.
Yeah, thanks,
Cheers.
Sam.